Every day, we're learning more about the water crisis in Flint, Michigan, and each piece of the puzzle that falls into place paints an ugly picture of how Republicans run the government. Let's go now to Howard Nations to tell us everything we know so far about the water crisis in Flint. Howard, I think the biggest lesson that we've learned so far from Michigan is that when you have Republicans governing, this is what they do. I don't know any more succinct way to put it other than that.
Well, you're absolutely right. Flint, Michigan is a microcosm of what happens with trade agreements, with the war on unions, with running government like a business, and with Republicans ignoring science. They create a crisis, they ignore it, they deny it, they cover it up, then they blame it on Obama. This starts with the trade agreements and the war on the unions. The auto industry was the heart of American industry for decades. And then Clinton came along with NAFTA. He shipped jobs to Mexico, and then the automakers also shifted their manufacturing jobs to the South where they could avoid unions. The result was that Detroit and Flint, Michigan, the cities around there, dried up. Then along came Bush and Cheney with their financial crisis, and the economic chaos for Detroit caused jobs to disappear. The city went into poverty. Homes and small businesses were boarded and abandoned. The whites fled to the suburbs if they could afford it. Minorities were left in the cities, and they were completely ignored by state government. Along came Obama, who saved the auto industry. You remember Romney wanted to let General Motors go bankrupt. And after the people of Michigan, I think, made a big mistake. After they were saved by a Democratic president, the first thing that they did was to elect a Republican businessman as governor. Rick Snyder was going to be the CEO governor. He was going to run government like a business. But they failed to distinguish between the cross purposes of business and government. Government's role is to deliver services and improve lives. The business purposes is to make a profit, cut costs, and eliminate jobs. And amazingly, they have this 2011 emergency manager law that they passed. This is how the Republicans actually circumvented the democratically elected government. The Republicans passed a law allowing the governor to run local government and appoint a CEO who is typed as an emergency manager. So the governor set aside the election of the mayor, city council, and other local officials, and the emergency manager took control of the local government, reduced the size and cost, privatized public property, cut services. And the emergency manager law was so unpopular that the citizens, by referendum in 2012, repealed it. The Republican government repassed it, and when they repassed it, they put a new provision in that said you can't repeal this by referendum again.
Unbelievable. See, you know what? That's a prime example of things that everybody at this point has heard of what's happening in Flint. But there's a lot that we don't know. I mean, what you just told me, I had not heard that. And so there is a lot of the story that's left untold. And the biggest thing is that Governor Snyder wanted to save a little bit of money. And that's what we're talking about here. This wasn't, hundreds of thousands of dollars that he saved from switching the city of Flint over to river water. This was $100 a day. $100 a day for 18 months. That's how much this man saved, and I guarantee you this emergency manager that they hired made a hell of a lot more than that. So on the whole, the city, the state, they lost money trying to save money, and that's the typical Republican model.
Well, what the emergency manager did specifically is he switched city water source from Detroit through a pipeline to draw on water from the polluted Flint River. Now, the river was acidic, which leaches lead and other metals from the pipes. The emergency manager chose not to add corrosion control chemicals, which would have because it would cost money. So this happened in 2014 with immediate citizen complaints of the taste and smell of brown water coming into their homes. The government completely denied the problem. They blamed the victims. And then they did what they're so famous for doing. They denied science. Yeah. There was a Flint pediatrician, Dr. Hannah Atisha, compiled blood tests on 1,746 children before and after April 2014. She discovered and reported an increase in the lead in children's blood levels. The Republican response to that they accused her of being an irresponsible researcher causing near hysteria. Fortunately, for whatever reason, Virginia Tech, a research scientist from Virginia Tech by the name of Mark Edwards, came to Flint to test the water. They showed dangerous levels of lead in the water. Finally, in October 2015, after spending all this time trying to deny and refute the science, they finally admitted and acknowledged the water was not drinkable. From April 2014 to October 2015, Flint citizens were drinking water filled with toxic levels of lead and other metals because the Republicans chose to deny science.
And what's interesting, and again missing largely from the conversations that we've heard so far in the media, is that this isn't just these people got some lead in their system, so now they got to go to the doctor, or now they've got to wait for it to go through. Look, lead poisoning, lead toxicity, it's not something that the body shrugs off. I mean, this absolutely permanently damages, especially the young children. And so the conversation now is moving towards, oh my God, what have we done to an entire generation of residents there in Flint with this health crisis?
Well, let me tell you what they've done. First of all, the Michigan government tested to achieve fake results. They manipulated the data to deny toxicity even after they're confronted with it by the researchers. What they found, the Virginia Tech researchers came back in, tested it again, and they found that the lead levels exceeded 5,000 parts per billion. The EPA definition of toxic waste is in excess of 5,000 parts per billion. Their highest readings were 13,000. So these people were drinking effectively toxic waste 2.5 times toxic waste content of their water for this whole period of time. Now, the effect on children. Lead has terrible and irreversible effects on all people's health, but especially children. The long-term effects, if you start with pregnant women, the low levels of lead can damage a fetus's nervous system, can affect behavior and intelligence, and in the woman it can cause miscarriages, can cause stillbirths, and infertility. Infertility in both men and women. I wonder, where is the pro-life community where is their concern about protecting these unborn children? Well, that's right. It's a Republican-caused problem, so that doesn't count. So, but now in the children who are already alive who are drinking this, this is the worst part of the story. Children have lasting neurological and behavioral damage. They have intellectual disabilities. They have serious difficulties controlling the impulse, retaining information, and learning. It's going to be difficult or impossible to later have thought-intensive jobs. We know a lot about lead because lead poisoning was a big problem in the 50s and 60s, and now we're back to it again. But physically, lead keeps the body from getting nutrients that's required for cell development, and lead builds up in the kidneys, the bone marrow, the liver, the brain, bones, and teeth, and can alter secretion of growth hormones, which cause stunting of growth and promotes obesity. So the long-term effects, also the worst part of this, long-term effects are often not diagnosed in children, and no connection is made to the lead. And so they don't know how to treat it. So these are problems that are going to come up for years in the future with these children.
And the saddest thing of all is that they knew this. They knew they were doing this. They knew it for months and months and months. We're giving city workers bottled water before they even acknowledged that there was a crisis, just so that they wouldn't get injured as well. We've got a little under a minute here. Where does this land?
Well, where it lands is on January 16th, President Obama finally declared an emergency in Flint, and he brought in FEMA with water and filters, but they're authorized to spend up to $5 million. Now compare that to the bailout of Wall Street. Obama failed to declare Flint as a disaster area because they usually reserve that for natural disasters. that would have provided many more resources. But there's no provision in the law for politically created disasters. Where we landed this week is on Wednesday, the House Committee Chair, Jason Chaffetz, directed, they had their first hearing on this in Congress. He directed most of his criticism at the EPA for addressing the problem too late. He didn't subpoena Governor Snyder. The emergency manager didn't show. So the Republican response to this now at the federal level is, well, let's blame it on the EPA. Let's blame it on Obama. I think Obama did get in there late, but this is a crisis that was absolutely created by Republican policies. There was a cover-up, there was a denial, and all to the detriment of these children who are going to have long-term neurological deficits for the rest of their lives. And this is an absolutely outrageous story of what happens when you apply Republican thoughts and principles and theories to real life.
Howard, thank you very much for telling us this story today.
Other than that, I have no opinion.